This Saturday night obviously has one of the more compelling weeknight slates in the week one slate, where you do see an LSU and Clemson going at it in primetime television. But what if I told you that there is a group of five matchup happening that could really play a pivotal role in terms of how both of these team seasons end up going within the 2025 campaign? And the game that I'm talking about that also happens to be going on at 7:30. So if you're looking for a little bit of G5 flavor, this could be a really fun game to watch in particular. So we got the UTEP Miners going on the road and take on the Utah State Aggies. A little bit of sort of Mountain West on Mountain West action. UTEP in one of its last years in the Conference USA. They are departing for the Mountain West at the end of this upcoming season, while Utah State, on the other hand, they are currently in the Mountain West at the moment, but they are actually making the transition to be a part of the Pac-12 and help revitalize that West Coast conferences as well. So a little bit of old Mountain West versus new Mountain West, which makes it fascinating in its own right, as well as the fact that we have two teams that may be improving and are generally trying to trend upward as we enter the 2025 season. UTEP particularly is a perfect example of that, as we are watching the Scotty Walden era enter its second season, as they came off of last year with a 3-9 record. But don't let that fool you, because this team showed tremendous progress as the season progressed. First half of the year, this was a horrific team to watch, right? They went 0-6 to start the year, and one of those losses even were including FCS Southern Utah. But as the year went on, UTEP looked like a much more respectable team in the Conference USA landscape. They finished 3-3, so definitely have something to build off of as you enter year number 2 under Scotty Walden. And you're also going to have one of the more dynamic receiving duos in the conference going in. You got Kenny Odom and Cam Thomas both coming back for another year. And we also have some intrigue at the quarterback position. Originally, when I first wrote this article and writing this script, we thought that Skylar Locklear was going to win that starting quarterback job, in spite of the fact that Malachi Nelson did transfer in from Boise State. But instead, it's actually the former 5-star Malachi Nelson who comes in, wins that starting job, and after starting his college career out at USC and then going over to Boise State, where he couldn't quite crack the starting lineup either, the former 5-star finally gets his chance to be the starting quarterback and to lead a team. So very fascinating to see what Malachi Nelson, how has he matured from his experiences at USC as well as from Boise State, as he looks to has a couple of quality weapons on the outside, right? Plus we know that he's going to be a pretty athletic guy. Going to be very fascinating to see how that dynamic develops over the course of the year, as well as what happens to Skylar Locklear. He still has multiple years of eligibility, but we'll worry about all that stuff down the line. But not only is there pieces on the offensive side of the ball for UTEP that they're going to love and enjoy as well, but they also have the defensive lineman Katie Johnson, who's going to be really the anchor of that UTEP front seven as they continue to rebuild this program, not necessarily through the transfer portal. I know we talked about some of those high marquee transfer portal guys like Malachi Nelson, but they mostly have done it under high school recruiting, bringing in some of the best high school recruiting classes in UTEP's history just in the short amount of time that Scotty Walden has been with the program. Plus, not to mention, you do bring in new coordinators that better fit the vision that Scotty Walden wants to bring, and there's definitely a lot of fascination for UTEP football going into 2024. But moving over to the other side real quick, for the Utah State Aggies, who are here at home, they have a brand new head coach in Bronco Mendenhall. Now, he was at Nevada for like 5 minutes and helped Nevada overachieve a little bit, but after that 1 year, he decides, I think enough is enough. We're going to go over to Utah State, lead them for the foreseeable future. We'll see how long he's there at Utah State. But Utah State comes at 4-8, and they do have a promising quarterback in Bryson Barnes, who comes in, has over 1,300 yards of total offense, 17 touchdowns total between the passing game and the running game. In limited action, wasn't the full-time starter last year, but now that he has a year under his belt, a full offseason, do we see him take that step forward, which may be somewhat difficult because you do have a significant transfer portal additions at the receiver position. Matter of fact, if you look at the R-Lads depth chart for the Utah State Aggies specifically, your top 5 wide receivers are all from the transfer portal. So there's a large range of outcomes in terms of what the Utah State passing game is going to look like because of the fact that you have all of those new pieces that you're trying to ingrain in the offense, and they're going to be all expected to play right away or at the bare minimum contribute. So it will be very fascinating as well to see how Bronco Mendenhall really gets all of those pieces together. But defensively, you do feel pretty good about the Utah State defense. You have Gabriel Igarez Jr. coming back for this Utah State squad. They come in as one of the premium defensive linemen, not only in this conference for the Mountain West, but maybe one of the best defensive linemen in the entire group of 5 that no one is really talking about. This is also the first time since the 2014 season that we do see these two teams matched up, which, to give some context for how long that's been, the last time these two teams met, NCAA football 2014, was a relatively new game, but they haven't met in the regular season in a long time, though. There's only been 2 such meetings. The one that I just talked about, where that 2014 matchup ends up being in the New Mexico Bowl, where Utah State does end up winning 21-6. But then the regular season matchup, this is the first time they actually meet in the regular season, where they also ended up being a Utah State victory 21-6, which is why I'm going with Utah State winning 21-6. No, I'm just kidding, but I do think this is going to be a really fun game to watch because I do expect Utah State, they're going to try to control the tempo with a dual threat quarterback that is provided by Bronson Barnes, so you're able to do a lot there, as well as a fundamentally sound defense. However, I do also think that UTEP, I think they're going to keep things close early, thanks to its athletic skill position duo and Kenny Owen and Cam Thomas. I think that's going to create some problems alongside the physicality up front and just really expecting a physical game in general. A couple of really good defensive linemen that I'm personally excited to watch on the college football Red Zone stream. And yes, you heard that correctly, we are going to have a college football Red Zone stream this Saturday. So we will be keeping a close eye on this one in particular when that 7:30 game comes up. But ultimately, I do think that we could see a situation where the Aggies could have that initial edge. But it just becomes in terms of how much, right? Because we have seen some recent movement on the Utah State UTEP game from a FanDuel perspective. So originally this was going to be around a field goal, but ever since we got a little bit closer to the season, the news about the Malachi Nelson starting thing, that becomes public. We actually seen this line actually move quite a bit. It goes from about Utah State being favored by about a field goal to now the Utah State Aggies, they're favored to about a touchdown. And I do think that there is a little bit of overcorrection there. I do think that UTEP is going to be able to keep things competitive. I do really like Scotty Walton. However, I do also think that because of the fact that Utah State, they're going to have a little bit more of a home field advantage at the end of the day. I think that is going to be the difference. I do think that UTEP does have some problems in containing Bronco Mendenhall with that dual threat ability that he does provide to that offense. So I think UTEP does end up covering. I will give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because I love what Scotty Walden is doing down there in El Paso, Texas. But at the end of the day, I think Utah State does end up pulling it out. They win 28-24, but UTEP, I do think at the very least, they do cover that 6.5 point spread that is currently being projected right about now.